The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name written across the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in a decade. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, already knowing, somehow, that nothing good waited inside. It was a funeral invitation. My father was dead. I stood there in my small Savannah kitchen, the paper shaking in my hands, trying to feel something. Anything. Grief, anger, relief. But all I felt was hollow. 10 years. 10 years since I'd heard a single word from the Hayes family. 10 years since I drove away from Charleston with a busted lip, a screaming baby in the back seat, and nowhere to go. I still remembered showing up at my father's door that night, bruised, terrified, begging for help. And I remembered his words, cold as winter steel.
"You made your bed, Emma."
Then he closed the door in my face. So I built a new life, got a job at the library, raised Caleb alone, learned how to breathe without flinching. And even though my father never called, never apologized, never asked if we were okay, I still sent money every month. Through old Gerald next door, I made sure Dad had what he needed. I never told anyone, especially not Caleb. Now he was gone, and they wanted me at the funeral.
"You going to go?"
Caleb's voice pulled me back. He stood in the doorway, 12 years old, watching me with those careful eyes that had seen too much, too young. I looked at my son, my anchor, and something shifted inside me. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I need to." Because maybe, just maybe, there was something left to be said. The chapel felt smaller than I remembered. Dark wooden beams stretched overhead, stained glass windows muted by gray Charleston clouds. It should have felt sacred, but the air inside was thick, sour with old perfume and older resentment. I stepped through the double doors with Caleb beside me, his hand tucked tight in mine. Heads turned before we'd made it halfway down the aisle. Whispers flared up like fire catching dry wood. Some people didn't bother hiding their shock. Others just stared like they were seeing a ghost walk through the sanctuary. Then I saw them. Victoria and Derek stood near the front pew, dressed in black that looked tailored for a magazine shoot, not a funeral. Grief worn like expensive jewelry, just enough to be noticed but not enough to smudge. Victoria's eyes found mine first. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face. Then her lips curved into something sharp and cold. "Well, well," she said, her voice cutting through the hushed chapel. "Guess the prodigal daughter thinks there's money left." A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably. Derek let out a low chuckle, but his eyes held no humor. Only that same judgment I'd grown up with, the kind that made you feel small without a word being spoken. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, spine straight, eyes forward. Even though every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run, I kept moving. We slid into the last pew, as far from them as possible. I wasn't here for them. I wasn't here for drama. I came to say goodbye. Caleb sat close, his fingers trembling slightly in mine. I leaned down and whispered, "It's okay, baby. We're just here to sit." But I knew it wasn't okay. Not really. The preacher cleared his throat. The service began. Prayers floated through the air, shaky eulogies from people who barely knew him, the kind of polite mourning that sounds rehearsed and hollow. My name was never mentioned, not once. They talked about his childhood, his military service, then jumped straight to Victoria's tireless care during his final years, Derek's business trips home to help manage things. The story was clean, edited, convenient. I'd been erased with precision. Caleb rested his head against my shoulder, quiet and still. I stared ahead, but my ears burned with every sideways glance, every muffled snicker hidden behind a tissue. I wasn't crying. Not because I didn't want to. I'd just done all my crying years ago when it actually mattered. When the service ended, people filed past without looking at me. One older cousin gave a stiff nod, then looked away quickly. Victoria brushed past like I didn't exist. Derek stopped just long enough to look me dead in the eye.
"Didn't think you had the guts to show up,"
he murmured. I met his gaze without flinching.
Neither did I. He smirked. Don't get comfortable. It's not your story anymore.
Then he walked away, and I sat frozen in that pew, Caleb's head still against me, his hand wrapped around mine like it was the only real thing in the room. They thought they'd buried me 10 years ago, but I was still here, and I wasn't going anywhere. The Hayes family home looked exactly the same. White columns, red brick, ivy climbing up the porch like it was slowly choking the house beneath. But stepping through that front door after 10 years felt like walking into a freezer. Cold, sterile, silent in all the wrong ways. Guests had already gathered inside, cousins I barely recognized, old neighbors, a handful of Dad's business associates. I knew most of the faces, but none of them looked directly at me. Conversations dropped to whispers when I entered. I could feel every glance like needles against my skin. Victoria stood near the fireplace, swirling white wine in a crystal glass like she was hosting a cocktail party. Derek leaned casually beside her, holding a glass of red, one hand tucked into his blazer pocket. They looked more like socialites than grieving children. When they saw me walk in with Caleb, Derek's mouth twisted into a grin.
Well, this shouldn't take long,
he announced, loud enough for half the room to hear.
She got cut out years ago.
A few people chuckled awkwardly. Others suddenly found something fascinating on the far wall. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I kept my coat on even though the fire was crackling. Caleb stayed glued to my side, his small hand gripping mine tightly. He didn't speak, but I felt his eyes scanning the room, watching every movement, reading the tension the way only a kid who's lived through silence and storms knows how. We took a seat near the back of the parlor, far from the hearth and the wine. I glanced around, taking in the framed photos lining the walls. Victoria in her college cap and gown, Derek on a sailboat, family vacations to Hilton Head. Not a single picture of me, not even from childhood. I wasn't surprised. I'd been erased long before Dad died. Victoria caught my eye and smiled. Not kindly, territorially, like I'd just stepped into her kingdom uninvited. "You can sit if you want, Emma," she said sweetly, "but don't expect a chapter." I gave her nothing, just silence. Caleb looked up at me, and I saw something in his face. Not fear, not confusion. Focus. Like he was waiting, like something important hadn't happened yet. And somehow I knew he was right. The room fell into an awkward hush when the front door creaked open again. Thomas Dawson stepped inside like a man who knew exactly what kind of battlefield he was walking into. Same crisp gray suit, same leather briefcase, but this time he carried something else too. A small cedar box, polished smooth, clutched tightly under one arm. Victoria barely glanced up from her wine. Derek checked his watch like he had somewhere better to be.
"Thank you all for being here,"
Mr. Dawson said, his voice low but commanding.
"Per Mr. Hayes's instructions, we'll begin with a video message before moving on to the formal reading."
The air shifted, tightened. "A video?" Victoria scoffed, already annoyed. "Can't we just get to the will? We all know what it says." Derek nodded.
"Yeah, let's not drag this out. Some of us have flights."
But Mr. Dawson didn't flinch. He walked past them calmly and set the cedar box on the coffee table in front of the fireplace. Then he placed his briefcase beside it and began opening the latches.
"It was your father's express wish," he said evenly, "that this be viewed before any legal matters are addressed."
Victoria rolled her eyes. Derek muttered something under his breath. A few cousins leaned forward, curiosity piqued despite themselves. I stayed quiet, but Caleb sat up straighter beside me. His grip on my hand loosened just slightly. I glanced down at him, and his face, soft and open, was lit with something quiet but unmistakable. Hope. He didn't say a word, but I could feel it radiating from him, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had, and for the first time since I walked into that house, I didn't feel alone. The screen flickered once, twice, then settled into focus. A faint hum filled the room, and then there he was, my father, older than I remembered, thinner too. His shoulders, once so proud and rigid, had slumped into something softer. His eyes, always so sharp and cold, were tired now, shadowed beneath a weight I couldn't name. He sat at his old oak desk, the one that used to be off limits to everyone. Behind him, the painting of the marsh still hung on the wall, same as it had my whole childhood. He looked directly into the camera.
"If Emma is watching this,"
he began, his voice low and gravelly,
"I owe you the apology I never gave."
Every breath in the room seemed to freeze.
"I was wrong," he said. "I judged you for leaving a marriage I didn't understand. I thought you were weak. I thought you were selfish. I let myself believe what I wanted to believe because it was easier than asking questions I wasn't ready to hear."
He paused, his fingers twitching slightly in his lap, a nervous tick I'd never seen before.
"When you showed up on my porch that night, bruised, shaking, with your baby in your arms,
I should have opened the door. I should have pulled you inside and said, 'You're safe now.' But I didn't. I let pride speak louder than love." A lump formed in my throat. Caleb reached for my hand again, his small fingers folding into mine. I didn't take my eyes off the screen. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was teaching you responsibility, but the truth is, I was punishing you. For leaving, for choosing yourself, for daring to be stronger than I ever taught you to be. Behind me, I heard someone shift in their seat, a sharp exhale, but I didn't turn. I couldn't. Not now.
"I found out the truth, Emma," he continued. "A few years ago, Gerald came by with an envelope, said it was from a friend who wanted to cover the heating bill. The handwriting gave you away. It didn't take long to figure it out."
He leaned forward slightly, eyes glistening.
"You sent money every month, for years, quietly. No credit, no contact. Just care. Even when I gave you nothing in return, even when I pretended you didn't exist, you never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father."
My breath hitched. I blinked hard, trying to keep the tears from falling, but they were already there. Hot, fast, silent.
"I watched you from a distance," he said.
"Gerald told me how you were doing. About the library. About Caleb. Said he was a bright one. Said he looks at the world the way you do, with patience." He smiled then, small, tired, and it broke me. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Emma, but if I can leave you with anything, let it be this. I was wrong. You were right. You did what I should have done a long time ago. You protected your child, you walked away from pain, and you built something better." He drew in a shaky breath. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who turned his back on his daughter, so I've changed the will. They don't know yet, but they will." Gasps fluttered around the room like startled birds. Someone cursed under their breath. Victoria shifted sharply in her seat. Derek's jaw tensed. I barely heard them.
"All I ever wanted was to be proud of my children," my father said. "And I am. Of you. Of the woman you became when I wasn't looking."
The screen, dimmed for a moment, then lit back up with his final words.
"Tell Caleb thank you for giving me one last chance to be a father, even if it was from a distance."
Then everything went black. Silence fell thicker than grief. No one dared speak. But for the first time in 10 years, I heard my father. Loud and clear. The screen had barely gone dark when the murmurs began. Confusion. Anger. Denial rippling through the room like shockwaves. Mr. Dawson didn't wait for silence. He adjusted his glasses, opened the leather folder on his lap, and spoke with calm authority.
"The video was to provide context. Now, per Mr. Hayes's revised, notarized, and legally binding last will and testament, I will read the final allocations."
Victoria let out a sharp breath through her nose like she was preparing for war. Derek folded his arms across his chest and leaned back, smug again, like the video meant nothing.
"To my daughter, Emma Hayes,"
Dawson began, his voice steady and formal, "I leave the Charleston family residence, its contents, and surrounding land in full." I felt the room turn toward me, necks snapping, disbelief flashing behind every set of eyes. My hands were frozen in my lap, Caleb's still tucked inside mine.
In addition, Dawson continued, I leave to Emma Hayes the sum of $250,000 in liquid assets and all remaining balances in my retirement savings. The air shifted, thickened. He wasn't done. And to her son, Caleb Hayes, I leave a college education trust in the amount of $100,000. My heart skipped. Caleb blinked up at me, his mouth slightly open, trying to understand what those words meant. I was still trying, too. Dawson paused, then flipped to the final page. To my son, Derek, and to my daughter, Victoria, I leave the following: a collection of family photo albums, my old military compass, and the Bible given to me by my mother when I turned 18. A gasp escaped from someone across the room. Victoria shot to her feet. What? Her voice was sharp, high, already shaking. That's not possible. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, Dawson said, unbothered. Your father amended the will 2 years ago. The documents are certified, witnessed, and registered with the county. Derek stood too, jaw clenched tight. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, Dawson replied, closing the folder with a soft snap. He was of sound mind. The amendment was made well before his health declined. There was a moment of stunned silence before Dawson spoke again, this time softer, reading from a handwritten note attached to the will. He asked me to read this aloud. Let them remember who showed up when it mattered. Let them remember who stayed quiet but never stopped loving. This house should belong to the one person who never asked for anything and gave anyway. Victoria's face flushed red. Her hands trembled as she set her wine glass down too hard on the sideboard. You had to have tricked him, she snapped, spinning toward me. There's no way he would have changed the will on his own. You must have. She stopped short, the accusation choking itself in her throat. I stood still, silent. The video had already said everything. You manipulated him, she said again, louder this time, voice cracking. After everything you did to this family, you waltz back in here and act like some silent saint. This is pathetic. Caleb flinched beside me. I rested a hand on his shoulder. He didn't need protecting. I just needed to ground myself, to remember I was still here. Derek stepped forward now, voice low but seething. We'll challenge it. There's no way this holds. He wasn't well. He was confused. Mr. Dawson didn't blink. Your father's will was amended 2 years before his health declined. He was of sound mind. It's witnessed, notarized, and on file with the court. There is no legal ground for dispute. Derek opened his mouth to argue again, but stopped when he saw Dawson's calm stare. The kind of stare that came with decades in courtrooms and zero patience for entitled theatrics. Around us, the rest of the room had gone still. Some of the cousins were whispering now. Others slipped out through the side door, coats clutched awkwardly, faces turned away from mine. No one wanted to look me in the eye, not out of hatred this time, out of something closer to guilt, maybe shame. Victoria's breathing had turned uneven. She looked like she didn't know whether to cry or scream. This is a joke, she muttered. It's a damn joke! She turned and walked out without another word. Derek followed a few seconds later, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. And just like that, the room emptied. They thought they'd buried me 10 years ago, but I was still here. And now, they were the ones running. The room was quiet now, not awkward quiet, not tense, just still, settled. I stayed where I was for a long moment, Caleb beside me, his small hand resting in mine. His grip had loosened, but he hadn't let go. Neither had I. No one else was left. The murmur of retreating voices had faded down the hall. Doors clicked shut. Footsteps disappeared into silence. I rose slowly and walked toward the corner of the room where the old leather reading chair sat tucked beneath the bay window. It was still there, unchanged, faded at the arms, creaking at the joints, worn into the shape of the man who once called it his throne. I stared at it for a second, then reached down and gently brushed my fingertips along the top edge. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. "I forgive you." The words didn't catch in my throat.
They didn't burn or twist. They just landed, like they'd been waiting to. Behind me, Caleb didn't speak. He didn't need to. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm orange glow over the room. The photographs on the mantel, the worn floorboards, even the air. It all felt different now. Not hostile, not heavy, just calm. I turned to look around the house one more time. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a place that had banished me. It felt like a home that had finally exhaled. Maybe some ghosts don't leave. Maybe they just wait for the right words. And I had finally said mine. Weeks later, the house was quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not destruction. Stillness. Peace. Caleb had claimed the sunroom for his art supplies. Every morning I found him there, sketching cardinals, blue jays, wrens, every bird he could spot in the backyard trees. His laughter sometimes echoed through the hallway, soft and bright, filling spaces that used to ache. One morning, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Gerald Adams. I opened it carefully, hands steady. Emma, the note read. The day he realized it was you, he cried. I'd never seen your father look so small. He carried that truth with him until the end. I folded the letter and stepped out onto the porch. Caleb sat on the top step, sketch pad on his knees, tongue between his teeth as he shaded in a hawk's wings. I looked out over the lawn, the oak trees swaying gently in the breeze. He saw me in the end, I said aloud, not to anyone in particular. Caleb glanced up at me and smiled. A real smile, the kind that made everything worth it. I smiled back. The girl they erased hadn't disappeared. She'd just been waiting for the truth to find its way home. And now, finally, it had. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one.
You are not invited. That's what my dad said, mid-bite, like it was nothing. Like he was telling me we were out of milk, not slicing me out of my own family. The room didn't fall silent. Because no one else spoke to begin with. Ethan, my older brother, looked down at his plate like maybe if he stared hard enough, this moment would vanish. My mom sipped her wine. My younger sister Claire just twirled her fork in her pasta, avoiding eye contact. But me, I just blinked. Dad kept going, like he hadn't just detonated the air. I mean, we all agreed. It's just better that way. No tension. He smirked as he said it. Like it was a joke. Like I was the tension. The birthday trip, the one I had organized, funded, planned down to the gluten-free dessert options, was next weekend. We were supposed to fly out to Napa Valley. Wine tastings, a private chef dinner, 2 nights at an estate I personally booked 6 months ago. Total cost. $5,200. All from my savings. It was supposed to be a surprise gift for Dad's 60th. A way to say, see, I do care. I'm trying. I want to belong. And now I wasn't even invited. Good to know, I said. Calm. Collected. Not a crack in my voice. Dad raised an eyebrow. Don't make it a thing, Riley. It's just family trying to keep things simple. Right, I said. Simple. I wiped my mouth. Folded my napkin. Pushed back my chair. No one stopped me. No one spoke. As I reached the door, Dad added, and hey, let's not get petty about the money, okay? It's not about that. I smiled. That smile I give before someone learns the hard way that I'm not as sweet as they think I am. Of course not, I said. It's not about the money. I walked out into the night. No tears, no scene, just the sound of betrayal settling quietly into my bones. I drove home. Opened my laptop. Logged into the travel booking portal. Every single reservation had a cancellation window. We were still within it. I hovered for a moment. Then clicked, cancel all. $5,200. Refunded. Next, I opened my banking app and transferred every cent of that money back into my primary account, including the rental deposits and a gift I had pre-ordered. I drafted an email with the subject line. Trip terminated. Body. You are free to celebrate how you choose, Just not on my dime. Best, Riley. Sent. Then I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. My name is Riley Monroe. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the night my family decided I wasn't invited, I became someone they would never forget. Not through shouting, but through subtraction. Growing up, I was the easy one. Not because I was easy to love, but because I didn't ask for much. Ethan was the golden boy, straight A's, varsity everything, dad's mini-me. Claire was the baby, delicate, artistic, always needing protection. And me. I was the one who handled her own dentist appointments. The one who remembered birthdays, even when no one remembered mine. I figured out taxes before I was old enough to drink. I was the responsible one. The one they didn't have to worry about. So they didn't. When dad needed help planning mom's pachaset, I booked the caterer, designed the invites, and handled the payments on my credit card. When Aiken totaled his car, I co-signed for the rental because he was in a bind. Claire needed help paying tuition after a bad breakup. I wired $3,000 without blinking. Not once did I ask for it back. Not once did they offer. Because I wasn't the one who needed help. I was the one they leaned on. And the thing about leaning on someone for too long. Eventually, they get tired of holding you up. I thought maybe the trip would shift something. Dad's Sarteth was supposed to be the olive branch. The grand gesture. I booked every detail down to his favorite bourbon being stocked in the minibar. I even requested a special playlist for the car service to play when he landed. I did it all quietly. Because that's how I was raised, be the glue, not the spotlight. But glue doesn't get applause. It gets used. And when it cracks, they replace it without a second thought. The real sting wasn't in being disinvited. It was in how casual it was. We all agreed. Like I was some complication they needed to manage. Like I wasn't the one keeping their fragile web from collapsing. After I cancelled the trip, I sat in bed and thought about every time I showed up for them. And every time they didn't show up for me. When I got my first promotion, no one called. When I moved into my new apartment, I unpacked every box alone. When I was sick for 3 weeks last winter and needed soup and silence, no one came. But Ethan's texts got answers in seconds. Claire's moods were family emergencies. Me. I was strong. A word they used like a leash. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted myself. Not out of pride. Out of grief. Because I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't part of the family. I was adjacent to it. Useful. Reliable. Replaceable. But not belonging. And now they were about to find out what happened when the afterthought daughter finally thought of herself first. No drama. No revenge. Just consequences. Quiet ones. And trust me, they echo the loudest. It came at raat ke 10:47. A text from my dad. Hey, just wanted to follow up. It's probably best you don't show up at the party. Less tension that way. Hope you understand. That was it. No, thank you, for organizing the entire trip. No, sorry, for blindsiding me at dinner. Just a cold, clinical boundary from the Sam people who had never respected mine. I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over. Hope you understand. What exactly did he think I was supposed to understand? That I was inconvenient. That being around me was somehow a risk. That removing me from the celebration, the one I planned, was for their peace. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the vacation folder on my desktop and highlighted every line item I had organized. Flights for 5. Estate rental confirmation. Chef deposit. Custom cake order. Vanilla bourbon with dark chocolate ganache. Dad's favorite. And then I opened my banking app again. A new notification. $5,200 refunded, pending clearance. I had it all back. The money. The power. The peace. I took a screenshot of the refund confirmation. Just for me. Proof that when you remove me from the guest list, you also lose access to the gift bag. Then I opened my email and found a group thread I'd created weeks ago. Subject, Dad's Sarteth birthday, itinerary finalized. I hit reply all. Deleted the original message. Typed a single sentence. Plans have changed. The trip is cancelled. Good luck figuring out your own celebration. Attached the refund screenshot. Hit send. Then I texted Dad back. You are right. Less tension this way. Enjoy the party, if it happens. No emojis. No exclamation point. Just enough edge to let him know that the girl they used to rely on, she would checked out. And she wasn't coming back. Then I powered off my phone. No more messages. No more justifications. I lit a candle. Put on my softest hoodie. Watched the quiet fill my apartment like a balm. They had made their decision. I had made mine. And now, we were all going to sit with the aftermath. Except I had wine, Netflix, and a full refund. And they had a birthday disaster on the horizon, and no one left to fix it. I woke up to silence. The kind that follows a bomb, not the kind that brings peace. My phone stayed off. I needed one more morning to myself, free from their guilt grenades and manipulative group chats. I made breakfast. Took a long shower. Watered my plants. Then, at subah ke 11:02, I turned my phone back on. It lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. Voicemails. Missed calls. Texts stacked like dominoes. 23 missed calls. 17 from Dad. 2 from Mom. 4 from Ethan. Claire hadn't called, which somehow made it worse. But what stopped me cold wasn't the number of calls. It was the message that sat quietly between the alerts. From Ethan. They are freaking out. I didn't agree to that. Please talk to me. That was it. No drama. No defense. Just quiet recognition that I hadn't imagined it all. Someone else had noticed the smirk, the dismissal, the unfairness. Still, I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened my inbox. One new email. Subject: Trip termination confirmed. It was official. The flights were refunded. The estate booking cancelled. Chef. Released. I had called the whole thing off, and every penny was mine again. I clicked through the details one more time, watching the transactions roll back like I was reversing time. They thought they could erase me from the weekend. But I had erased the weekend. I scrolled to the group chat. Dozens of new messages. Claire. Wait, did Riley really cancel everything? Dad. Riley, this is immature. You knew this was for the family. Mom, we didn't mean for it to come out that way. You misunderstood. Claire again. This is a nightmare. The wine estate is fully booked now. What are we even doing? Then finally, Ethan. She planned everything. Paid for it. And you cut her out. What did you expect? I stared at that last message for a long time. It wasn't vindication. Not exactly. But it was a crack in the wall. The beginning of the collapse. I screenshot the entire thread. Not to post. Just to remember. Because sometimes, you need to look back and see the moment when people stopped pretending you were the problem and started realizing you were the backbone. I brewed another cup of coffee. Sat by my window. Watched the clouds shift and thought. They built the party without me. But forgot who built the foundation. And when I pulled my support, it all came crashing down. By the next morning, the group chat had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that always follows a storm, when the power's out, and everyone's pretending they weren't the ones who pulled the wires. I scrolled through the final messages. Dad had stopped texting. Mom hadn't replied to Ethan's defense. Claire was Mia. Her version of damage control was always silence. But Ethan. He messaged me directly at subah ke 7:14. Can I come over? I waited 15 minutes. Then typed back. 1 hour. No lies. At 8:08 on the DOT, he knocked. No flowers. No fake apology. Just my older brother, standing in the doorway like a man finally ready to speak without hiding behind the word, family. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, hands in his hoodie pockets like a teenager again. We sat at my kitchen island. He didn't ask for coffee. Didn't make jokes. Just exhaled. I didn't know, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't know they planned to disinvite me. Or didn't know I paid for everything? His shoulders slumped. Both. I said nothing. I found out about the trip last minute, he continued. Mom told me it was handled. Dad just said it was taken care of. I didn't realize you'd funded all of it. I pulled up a folder on my tablet, slid it across the counter. It was titled, Receipts for Silence. He opened it, saw the spreadsheets, the deposits, the contracts, even the birthday card I'd written but never mailed. His face fell. Jesus, he muttered. Yeah. I'm sorry, Riley. I looked him in the eye. Why didn't you say something at dinner? I didn't think they were serious. They were. And you said nothing. He nodded, shame thick in his throat. I have always known they treat you differently, he admitted. I just never knew how deep it went. It went $5,200 deep, Ethan. He flinched. I continued. You all thought I was optional. Background support. But when I walked away, the entire celebration crumbled. He swallowed. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. What you have been carrying. For a moment, I softened. Because I remembered being kids, how he used to sneak me candy when I was grounded, how he let me tag along with his friends even when it annoyed him. He wasn't the enemy, but he'd been a bystander for too long. I didn't need a hero, I said. I just needed a witness. You have one now. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope. This was for you. From Grandma. She wrote everyone letters before she passed. Mom never gave yours to you. My breath caught. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside, a card in Grandma's shaky handwriting. Riley, they won't always see your worth. But that doesn't mean it's not shining. You were never hard to love. You were just hard to control. And that scared them. Love always. Grandma. The tears came. Not for the family that betrayed me, but for the woman who saw me, even when I wasn't invited to the table. I looked up at Ethan. Thank you, I said. He nodded. You deserved to hear that. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Because I hadn't just reclaimed my money. I'd reclaimed me. 3 days after Ethan left my apartment, the ripple effect hit full force. It started small, a tagged photo I didn't expect. Ethan had posted a throwback of the two of us as kids, sitting in a blow-up pool, smiles wide and wild. The caption. She's always been the glue. Sorry it took me this long to say it. It was subtle. Quiet. But the comments lit up. Aunt Marlene. Wait, Riley planned a trip. Cousin Jamie. This explains so much. Good on you, man. Even Mom's friend Janet commented. I knew something felt off about the party talk. Poor Riley. I didn't post anything. I didn't have to. Ethan's one gesture opened the door, and what came flooding in was decades of hushed acknowledgments finally finding words. I started receiving texts from extended family. I never knew you paid for Claire's tuition. Your mom told us the vacation was a gift from your dad's company. You deserve better, Riley. I responded to none of them. Because the time for validation had passed. I wasn't interested in being seen now that I was gone. But I did make one move. I uploaded a single Google Drive folder, titled, What Riley Paid For. It wasn't public. Just sent directly to the family group chat, no commentary, no warning. Inside, neatly labeled PDFs of every major expense I'd quietly covered for the family over the last 7 years. Ethan's car rental after the accident. Claire's emergency tuition deposit. The wine tour, the rental property, the chef, the flights. Even a $700 emergency vet bill for Mom's dog, which she swore she would handle next month. The document ended with a simple line. Not for reimbursement. Just for record. Next time you divide the guest list, remember who footed the bill. Claire messaged first. I didn't know about half of this. I'm sorry. I left it on read. Mom didn't message me at all. But I did get a call from a private number later that night. I didn't answer. The voicemail was brief. Dad, clearing his throat. We were wrong. You didn't deserve that. I know saying sorry isn't enough. I don't expect you to forgive us. Just know that we are sitting with it now. Sitting with it. Good. Because I'd sat with it for years. The birthdays I spent alone. The way every celebration was an obligation I funded but wasn't invited to enjoy. The silence they gave me in return for my sacrifices. Now, let them sit in the silence I left behind. Let them sit in the reality where I was no longer their financial safety net, their party planner, their invisible fixer. Because I had pulled the curtain back. And what they saw wasn't just the receipts. It was the reality. I was the one who kept them from falling apart, not with nerves, but with quiet, consistent love. Love they mistook for obligation. But that chapter was closed now. And the next one. It had my name on the door. I spent Dad's birthday weekend exactly how I wanted. Alone. And unbothered. The Sam Vineyard estate I'd reserved for the family. I rebooked it for one. Just me. They lost their invitation. I claimed the destination. The moment I stepped onto the property, the concierge greeted me with a puzzled smile. We were expecting 5 guests. Change of plans, I said. The guest list shrank, but the celebration got better. I spent the first day sipping aged Cabernet on a private balcony, curled up in a cashmere throw, watching the hills roll with the wind. No tension. No guilt. No one asking what time the shuttle was coming. The chef I'd hired? Still on call. I texted my preferences. He prepared an exquisite solo dinner, seared salmon, wild mushroom risotto, creme brulee. I toasted with sparkling rosé under the stars. To endings, I whispered, glass raised. To the silence I no longer have to explain. The next day, I booked a massage, then wandered the vineyard rows barefoot, laughing with the staff who asked if I was celebrating something. I told them yes. Freedom. Later that night, I took a photo, the fire pit behind me, wine in hand, no makeup, just peace. Then I posted it to Instagram with the caption. I wasn't invited to the party. So I threw my own. Funny how you celebrate louder when you are not paying for someone else's silence. By morning, it had 12,000 likes. Strangers flooded the comments. This is art. Teach me your ways. You are my new role model. They didn't deserve a seat at your table anyway. Even Ethan commented. Proud of you. Claire messaged too. That post hit me hard. I hope someday we talk. For real. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because sometimes, the best reply is space. I checked my inbox. An invitation from a women's conference to speak on financial boundaries and reclaiming identity. Subject line. Your story matters. And others need to hear it. I stared at it for a long time. Then clicked, accept. That evening, I walked down to the private tasting room where the staff had set up a birthday cake. For me. Not because it was my actual birthday. But because I requested it. Because I finally understood something profound. Celebration isn't about balloons or invites or other people saying your name. It's about claiming your worth. Loudly, softly, and without apology. And I wasn't just celebrating a cancel party. I was honoring the girl who used to beg to be seen. She didn't beg anymore. She booked the room. It was a week later when he showed up. I was back home, sipping tea in my robe, scrolling through my inbox of speaking offers and kind messages from strangers who would seen my post. And then, a knock. Not urgent. Not loud. Just steady. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there, hands in his jacket, eyes tired but clearer than I'd ever seen them. I figured you'd open it, he said. No one else would. I stepped aside. Silent. He handed me something wrapped in tissue paper. A small package. I peeled it open slowly. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Grandma, and Ethan, taken 10 years ago at the lake house. I'd forgotten this photo even existed. I was laughing in it. Not smiling politely, laughing. Mouth open, joy real. Grandma always kept that one on her dresser, he said. After she passed, Mom packed it away. I found it in storage. I stared at it, throat tight. She saw you, Ethan continued. Always did. I placed the frame gently on the entry table. then crossed my arms. Why are you really here, Ethan? He met my gaze. To say what they won't, he said. That we failed you. Not just with the trip, with everything. We made you feel optional. But you never were. You were the core. I didn't cry. But something shifted inside me, like a door creaking open that had long been locked. I don't need an apology, I said softly. I needed this. Truth. Without the strings. He nodded. There are no strings left. Just regret. And maybe hope. He handed me one more thing. A folded letter. Dad's handwriting. Riley, you didn't deserve the way we treated you. I thought being tough on you meant you'd never break. But I see now, I was breaking you just by expecting you to hold everything. I'm sorry. I was wrong. You deserved better than the silence we gave you. No manipulation. No, but just a man who finally understood the damage he helped create. I folded the letter carefully. Then looked Ethan in the eyes. I'm not coming back, I said. Not to fix. Not to rescue. If I come back, it'll be as a guest. Not a lifeline. He smiled. You have always been more than a lifeline, Riley. You were the lighthouse. I didn't know what to say to that. So I hugged him. Briefly. Tightly. Then I closed the door. Not in anger, in peace. I walked to the living room and placed the photo beside Grandma's letter. Sat on the couch. Let the sun spill over me. I had no party to plan. No crisis to manage. No guilt to carry. Just space. And in that space, I finally heard the quiet I'd been searching for all my life. Not absence. Not exile. But clarity. Because I wasn't disinvited. I just chose not to sit where I was never respected. And when I walked out, I didn't leave the family. I left the fiction. And in doing so, I wrote something real. You are her sister. It's your responsibility. That's what my mother said, was sharp, arms crossed, judgment etched into every wrinkle around her mouth. My father didn't speak at first. He just stared at me like I was some ungrateful guest at his table, instead of the daughter who had paid her own tuition, her own rent, and her own peace of mind for years. Hailey sat between them, not even pretending to be sorry. Her legs were crossed like she was waiting for a nail appointment, not a bailout. She's in trouble, Lauren, Mom continued. You have the money. You could clear her debt in a day. What's the big deal? I looked at Hailey. She didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled. Not the kind that says thank you. The kind that says gotcha. I have been saving for a down payment, I said calmly. That's my future. My home. Dad finally spoke. Hailey is your family. A house can wait. Blood can't. I nodded slowly. So it's my job to clean up her messes. Because I was born first. Mom leaned in, eyes cold. Because you're the only one in this family who's not a disaster. And it's time you act like it. The silence afterward said everything they believed about me. Not that I was successful. That I was convenient. That I could be used. Hailey's Bailey's $1,000 in debt wasn't an accident. It was a lifestyle. A blur of boutique shopping, bottle service, and living off the idea that someone else would clean it up when it crashed down. Someone like me. I looked at her again. She was scrolling through her phone. Not even pretending to care. My hands were clenched in my lap. But my face. Still. Calm. Not a single emotion leaked out. Because this wasn't new. I had always been the one who sacrificed. The one who smiled when they overlooked me. The one who paid my way, while Hailey got help. It wasn't about fairness. It was about roles. Hailey got to fall. I was expected to catch. Always. So I looked at them all, my parents and a golden child they had trained me to carry, and I said, okay. They blinked. Hailey looked up. I'll give her the money. Mom let out a breath of relief, like she had just won. Dad nodded once, like I'd finally learned obedience. Hailey smirked. Guess being the responsible one finally pays off. I stood. Pushed my chair in gently. Kissed my mom on the cheek. Shook my father's hand like a transaction was complete. Then turned to Hailey. You'll get it, I said. Soon. Her eyebrow arched. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just left the house. No slam of the door. No raised voice. Just the sound of my heels tapping down the driveway and my heart finally going still. My name is Lauren Blake. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the day I agreed to give them my savings was the day I stopped being the family's safety net and became their reckoning. The first time I realized I was born into a hierarchy, I was 10. Hailey was 6 and had just thrown my spelling bee trophy into the bathtub. She said it looked too shiny and made her feel small. When I cried, my mother didn't comfort me. She said, "It's just a piece of plastic, Lauren. Don't make a scene." When Hailey cried because I got to go to a science camp, I didn't get to go after all. They said I needed to be considerate of her feelings. That was my training ground, where I learned the weight of invisible responsibility. Hailey's happiness mattered more than my achievement. Her comfort was more important than my growth. I started doing chores at 11. Hailey didn't lift a finger. At 16, I had a part-time job. Hailey had a credit card with a $500 monthly allowance. I paid for my textbooks in college. She paid for tequila shots in Cancun. And every time I brought it up, every single time, the response was the same. "You're older, Lauren. You're supposed to set an example." No one said that Hailey was supposed to try. So I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped asking to be seen. Instead, I focused on building. I worked 2 jobs through college, took night classes, learned how to stretch B's dollar into a week's worth of meals. I graduated with honors and not a single soul from my family showed up. Hailey failed out of her marketing degree twice. She got a new iPhone to help her focus better. When I got my first real job in corporate finance, I treated myself to a thrift leather bag. Hailey posted pictures from her third girl's trip that year, writing, "Thankful for family that always has my back." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't thanked. But I was the reason her rent was mysteriously paid. The reason my parents weren't hounding her, because they were too busy expecting me to balance the checkbook of their denial. I never complained. Not out loud. But every time I handed over another loan, I knew I'd never get back. Every time I bit my tongue while Hailey bragged about her manifestation lifestyle. Every time I saw the way my mother looked at her like she was fragile gold and looked at me like I was concrete, strong but cold. I remembered, and I saved. Not just money, receipts. Every transfer. Every text. Every email where they asked for help. Every lie they told each other about how Lauren's doing fine, she can afford it. I filed it all away. Because one day I knew there would come a moment when they would ask for too much. And I'd say yes. And it would be the last time they would ever underestimate the daughter who kept this family from collapsing. The one they called cold. The one they thought they could use and dismiss in the same breath. They raised me to be responsible. But they forgot something. They also raised me to be brilliant. And brilliance doesn't just glow. It burns. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing a merger proposal when my mom's name flashed across my screen. I answered, against my better judgment. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't even pretend. "Hailey's in trouble," she said. Of course she was. Again. I leaned back in my chair, silent. She ran up her credit cards. Some mistakes. She owes $42,000. And interest is piling up. Mistakes, I repeated. She didn't mean to. She never means to. That's the problem. There was a long pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line, calm but heavy. "Lauren, we need you to transfer the money. Today, if possible." No please. No emotion. Just business. Just expectation. I could almost hear Hailey in the background, probably scrolling through Instagram, unbothered. Mom came back on. "You have always been the steady one. You saved for a reason, didn't you? Maybe this is the reason." I stared at the glass window of my office. The city stretched beyond it, towers of ambition, consequence, cost. "I'm not a bank," I said quietly. "You're her sister," Mom snapped. "And she's drowning." No, I thought. She's floating on the backs of people like me. But I didn't argue. Because they weren't listening. They never had. Hailey's voice suddenly cut through the background. I'll pay her back, she said, laughing. Eventually. She said it like a joke. Like she already knew she wouldn't. I breathed in. Exhaled slow. Then said, fine. I'll send it. A pause. My mother sounded stunned. You will? Yes. I'll cover it. Hailey shouted something in the background that sounded like, knew it. But, I added, I want it in writing. All three of you. A statement saying this was your request, your condition, and that I agreed without argument. Lauren, that's not necessary. Then I'm not transferring a dime. Silence. Then, fine. We'll write it. I hung up. 20 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox with a signed PDF. I read it twice. Then smiled. They had no idea what they would just given me. Because it wasn't just permission. It was proof. Proof that they had come to me, not the other way around. Proof that they believed I was so desperate to keep the peace that I'd hand over years of sacrifice without blinking. And for once, they were right. I would give them the money. Just, not the way they expected. Because I wasn't stupid. I wasn't soft. I wasn't the girl who kept patching holes in a boat while the rest of the family danced on the deck. No. This time, I was going to let the ship sink. But first, I was going to make sure they thanked me for it. And then I'd walk away with dry feet and a lifeboat built from everything they thought I didn't have the courage to protect. I transferred the money that afternoon, exactly $42,000. But not from the account they thought I'd use. That account, the one they knew about. It stayed untouched. Instead, I moved the funds from my investment pool, a holding account I'd built from stock options, silent partnerships, and a side consultancy I'd never told them about. They believed my entire net worth lived in one savings account. They were wrong. Because when you grow up being treated like a human ATM, you learn how to store your gold where greedy hands won't reach. The account Hailey's debt was paid from was under the name Blake Ledger Advisory Trust, my shell corporation, formed 3 years ago. Legally sound. Untraceable to their shallow understanding of finance. But the transfer wasn't the move. It was the setup. I created a trust in Hailey's name, tied directly to that money. But with strict stipulations. The money could only be withdrawn in monthly increments of $700, contingent on her completing verified financial literacy training, submitting quarterly budgets, and maintaining zero new debts. Break any clause. Access revoked. She wouldn't see the full amount for 5 years if she played by the rules. I knew she wouldn't. That wasn't Hailey's style. She would want it all. Now. Without work. And when she found out she couldn't touch a cent without following grown-up rules. The tantrum would be delicious. Meanwhile, I began my exit. I rerouted every shared payment method my parents might still be linked to, old utilities, dormant accounts, family billing arrangements. Closed them all. Deleted shared cloud drives, changed passwords, scrubbed access. I was done playing their safety net. Then, I met with my lawyer and made 2 final moves. First, I updated my will, leaving the bulk of my estate to a foundation for women who, like me, had spent their lives being told to hand over everything they worked for just because they were strong enough to spare it. Second, I filed a cease and desist against Hailey for impersonating me to secure a predatory loan under my name 2 years ago, something I discovered and covered in silence at the time. No more. The paperwork was ready. If she pushed, I'd press charges. By the end of that week, I had built a fortress out of everything they thought was vulnerability. And all they had left was the illusion of control. One I was about to shatter. Because Hailey would log into the trust account by the weekend. My parents would check their statements. And what they would find wouldn't be gratitude. It would be structure, discipline, boundaries, the very things they resented me for. I wasn't the cold daughter. I was the one who finally set the temperature right. And now, it was about to get very uncomfortable in their little climate of entitlement. Saturday morning came with thunder. Not outside, inside my phone. 3 missed calls from mom. 2 from dad. 11 from Hailey. I didn't answer. Instead, I brewed coffee, poured it slow, sat at the counter and waited. At सुबह के 8:12 I got a text from Hailey. WTF is this trust fund crap? Where is the money? I smiled, just a little. At 8:21 Mom called again. This time, she left a voicemail. Lauren, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't what we agreed on. You said you'd transfer the money. I hit play again. You said you'd transfer the money. I had. They just didn't ask how. At 9:06 Dad finally texted. His messages always came later, quieter. Lauren, we're disappointed. This is cruel. I nearly choked on my coffee. Cruel. Let me tell you about Cruel. Cruel was sitting at every family dinner, hearing how Hailey just needed support, while I paid for her car insurance behind the scenes. Cruel was watching my mother defend her while she mocked me in front of guests. Cruel was being told I was too independent to need attention. But now that I dared to act on my own terms, now I was Cruel. By noon, the group text exploded. Hailey, I can't even access my money unless I pass some stupid budgeting test. What the hell is wrong with you? Mom, you made us look like fools. Me? I gave her the money. I even have your signed document saying that's what you wanted. You didn't ask about the method. You demanded the result. You got it. Silence. And then the best text of all, from Dad. You need to undo this. Today. I replied. You told me to take responsibility. I did. I set limits. I created structure. I made sure she wouldn't spiral again. That's what responsible people do. Hailey called, again. I picked up. She was shrieking before I could say hello. You made a fool of me. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the mirror. You think you are so smart. I don't think. I know. And you should have paid attention when I offered you grace instead of structure. Now you have got rules. Real ones. I'm telling Mom. She's already called. 12 times. Click. She hung up. I closed my phone, took a long sip of coffee, and smiled, because I hadn't just protected my savings. I'd taken back my identity. They would always see me as the one who would bend. The reliable one. The quiet one. The sister who would never say no. But now, I had said no in the most polite, legally airtight, financially irreversible way possible. And I'd done it with their full permission. They just didn't read the fine print. Now the money had terms. And their illusion of control. Gone. Hailey couldn't party with it. They couldn't touch it. And I had never felt more free. It only took 48 hours for the polite masks to fully fall. Hailey posted on Instagram first, a now-deleted story of her crying in her car, captioned, "Some people pretend to help just to make you feel small. Gaslighting family is the worst." I screenshot it. For the file. Then came the messages from family friends. "Hey Lauren, saw something strange on Hailey's story. You okay? Your mom mentioned there's drama. Just checking in. You're the strong one, always have been. Always the strong one. Translation, we expected you to keep taking it." By Monday, my parents were in full-blown PR crisis mode. They called an emergency family meeting. At their house. I declined. So they showed up at my condo. Uninvited. I opened the door. Calm. In control. They stood there, worn and weathered, as if I had aged them by forcing them to look in a mirror. "Mom didn't wait. You have embarrassed us. Humiliated your sister. Do you even care how this makes us look?" "I care that you finally look like what you are," I said. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "Parents who picked a favorite and expected the other one to pay for it." Dad sighed. "We never meant for this to get out of hand. You meant to control me. You just didn't think I'd learn to control more than you did." They stepped inside like they still had authority. Sat on my couch like they still had access. Mom leaned forward. "Undo the trust. Give Hailey access. She's suffering." "So am I," I said softly. "But you never showed up with this energy for my pain." She's your sister. She's your mistake. And I have been covering for it my whole life. Dad tried a different tactic. What happened to the girl who helped her family? She evolved, I said. She realized that help isn't the same as being used. Silence. Then Mom dropped the mask entirely. If you don't fix this, we're cutting you off. I blinked once, then let out a laugh so hollow it echoed. Cut me off from what? The emotional debt. The guilt. The phone calls when your golden child overdrafts again. They didn't respond. Because we all knew I was the one who would be cutting them off, one boundary at a time. I stood, walked to my desk, pulled out a folder and handed it to them. Inside, printed bank statements, transaction logs, screenshots of text messages from the past 7 years. Every loan, every favor, every time they took and never returned. I kept receipts. All of them. Just in case you ever try to spin the story. They flipped through the pages in silence. Mom's lips pressed tight. Dad's jaw clenched. Then I added one more thing, a copy of my will. It listed no family members. Just charitable foundations. Female entrepreneurs. A scholarship fund. This is who I take care of now, I said. People who don't demand. People who respect. They left without another word. No apology. No understanding. Just the weight of a system collapsing, a system where I played the silent pillar. But I was done holding it up. Let it fall. Let them fall with it. Because some families don't break. They rot. And I finally stopped pretending the smell was flowers. 6 months later, I bought a house. Not a mansion. Not a showpiece. Just a quiet, sunlit home with hardwood floors and a porch swing that creaked when the wind was right. A home with enough space to breathe, but not enough for them to try and move in. The closing was smooth. I paid in full. No loans. No cosigners. Freedom had an address now. I planted lavender outside the front door. Not because I needed to, but because I could. That week, I launched something bigger. The Blake Foundation. A private fund dedicated to helping first-generation women secure financial independence through grants, mentorship, and legal support. The first campaign. No is a complete sentence. It was personal. We offered $10,000 grants to women who had escaped financially abusive family dynamics. The response was overwhelming. One recipient wrote, "My mother tried to guilt me into giving my savings to my brother. He called me selfish. I almost gave in. Then I read about you. And I didn't." Her words made me cry. Not from sadness. From recognition. Because that had been me once, standing at the edge of someone else's need, being told to dive in while they stayed dry. But not anymore. I gave a podcast interview a few weeks later. The host introduced me with, "She turned familial guilt into generational wealth. Please welcome Lauren Blake." We talked about boundaries. About the myth of the strong sibling. About how silence, when intentional, is strategy, not surrender. Then he asked me, "If you could say one thing to the version of yourself who said yes to that $1,000 request, what would you tell her?" I paused. Then smiled. "Thank you. You didn't betray yourself. You just learned how deep the betrayal already went." The episode went viral. But the real reward came one afternoon, when I walked into a coffee shop and a barista, a young woman with tired eyes, whispered, "You were her, right? The sister who said no." I nodded. She handed me my drink with trembling hands and said, "I needed to see that. That saying no doesn't make you a villain." I left a $100 tip. Because I wanted her to know, her worth didn't start with being needed. And neither did mine. That night, I sat on my porch swing, watching the stars. My phone buzzed. A notification. Hailey Blake attempted to withdraw $1,000 from her trust. Request denied. She hadn't completed the financial course. Again. She still thought rules were optional. Still thought someone would eventually bend. But I'd bent for years. Now I stood tall. Not out of spite. But out of peace. Because the real wealth. It was never the money. It was knowing I'd finally built a life that didn't require pain to maintain it. A life where I didn't have to be the hero or the martyr. Just free. It happened on a rainy Sunday. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall, it soaks. I was curled up on my couch, reading a manuscript from one of our grant recipients, a single mother writing her way out of generational debt, when I heard it. 3 knocks. Firm. Familiar. I opened the door slowly. There they stood. My parents. Soggy. Silent. Small in a way I had never seen them before. My mother clutched her coat like it might dissolve. My father looked like he hadn't slept in days. And between them, standing a step behind, was Hailey. No lashes. No gloss. No phone in her hand. Just wide, wary eyes like she didn't know how to play her usual part. Can we talk? Mom said softly. I didn't move. Just stared. Please, Dad added. So I let them in. They didn't sit right away. They hovered. Like they weren't sure they were allowed to. I stayed standing too. Hailey was the first to speak. Her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to cheat the system. Yours. I thought I'd find a way around it. But I couldn't. I raised an eyebrow. So you were here because you couldn't win. I'm here because you were right, she said. That shut me up. Mom cleared her throat. We thought we were protecting her. That if we just kept shielding her, eventually she would become strong. She never had to be, I replied. Because you had me. Silence. Then Dad spoke. You were the one holding this family together. We just didn't realize it wasn't your job. No, I said. It wasn't. They sat down finally, Hailey beside them. We are not here to beg, Mom said. We just want to understand. Maybe even fix it. If we still can. I looked at her. Then at him. Then at the sister who had once looked at me like a human safety net. I walked over to the coffee table. Picked up a photo frame, my mother's sewing machine, now displayed in my office. I built everything from what you left me, I said. And what you left me was silence, expectation, and survival. I'm sorry, my mother whispered. My father nodded. We both are. But I didn't need their apologies. Not anymore. Because I wasn't the daughter hoping to be heard. I was the woman who would stop needing their permission to thrive. So I told them the truth. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean returning to the way things were. You can be sorry, and I can still protect what I have built. Tears filled my mother's eyes. She didn't fight me. That was new. Hailey stood. I don't expect anything. But I'm going to finish that course. I'm going to earn every dollar. No more shortcuts. Good, I said. They left soon after. Quieter, humbled, not fixed but unraveling the right way. And as I shut the door behind them, I realized something profound. Sometimes closure isn't fire and fury. It's standing in your own home, on your own terms, with your own peace. Watching the storm leave your porch. Because once they treated me like an obligation. Now, I was the lesson. The line. The legacy. And no one was crossing it again.